You are listening to Take Sports, breaking down the NBA game with insight and analysis all in one take. So without further ado, let's get to the show.
Hello and welcome to Take Sports, where we do sports podcasting in one take. Today is August 9th. I'm sitting here with Steve, and we're going to talk a little bit about some stuff that's going on in the NBA. Obviously, we got the Hall of Fame stuff. We're probably going to touch on that last. The Kevin Love trade, which was just made official. And the first thing that we're going to touch on is the 76ers, because we published out there that we were going to do the 76ers last week, and we didn't do that. So we got to make sure we get to those 76ers this week. Steve, why don't you say hello, though?
Yeah, it definitely seems like we run out of time every week. But yeah, I'm Steve, and get up for another great show tonight. Some interesting stuff going on. It was Hall of Fame week, and that's something an old timer like myself can get really excited about. Like John said, we're going to jump right into things early. We're going to get things going, and we did want to talk a little bit about the Sixers, what the Sixers can do to improve, where they stand right now. Just kind of an interesting team to take a look at.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump right into it. Let's start with what the biggest issues for the Sixers are that like right now as the team stands. They have Embiid, but they're getting Nerlens Noel back. How much of an impact do you think he's gonna have? Let's not really touch on Embiid yet because honestly, like we haven't even really seen him play lately. So, he's not even going to play this year. So let's just make sure we're touching on the Noel, the current team as it stands right now. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Noel was definitely impressive during Summer League. We've had the conversation before that Summer League doesn't really say too much what a player is going to do, but I think he's in a great situation to come in and on that team. Come in and be an impact right away. He's had a year under his belt to see what the NBA life is about. That's huge. I mean, you always forget about the adjustments to NBA life and just living that kind of life. He was with the team last year. He was in rehab. Keeping him out the whole year was definitely a very smart move. I think it needed to be done anyways. But I think I'm really excited to watch him play. He's actually a player that would make me want to watch a Sixers game. And I mean, you look at the rest of the team, and there isn't much there to be honest with you. To want to watch the team beyond on him and MC Dub. But I personally think he's going to come in and contribute and do a really good job right away. Is he going to be Rookie of the Year? I doubt it. I'm not sure if he can be Rookie of the Year. I believe he can, but I just think he's going to be one of these rookies who comes out and makes a lot of noise this year.
Well, I mean, I agree with you in that he's definitely going to be a draw as far as like wanting to watch them. I've always liked Thaddeus Young, but the big thing with this team, they're definitely rebuilding. I don't think anyone's gonna try to fight me on that. Michael Carter Williams is an exciting young player. I still would like to see him increase his shooting percentage a little bit. He's still not a very good shooter, and he's a young guy. Not a ton of young guys are great shooters, but he's only shooting 26% from beyond the arc. That's big man bad. So he definitely needs to improve that. And but at the same time, he's a big, tall guard. He's actually pretty good at defense, mostly because of those big, long arms. And he's an exciting player to watch. You go down this roster though, and there really isn't much else to get excited about. I mean, you're looking at Michael Carter Williams. I would throw Thaddeus Young in that mix as well as a guy that I think is a good player on this team.
And keep in mind, real quick, Thaddeus Young is probably not going to be playing for this team either. If we get into Kevin Love, but if all that comes into fruition, it looks like he could be a Timberwolf. Supposedly, there could be that third team involved being the 76ers, and they're talking about moving him to the Timberwolves to make that trade work. I'm seeing more and more of that come up right now. And I think the Sixers, once again, being in that full rebuilding mode, he's another player, which I kind of don't understand, but he's another player that they're looking to move. my opinion, he's still young. I'm not even sure that team has anybody over the age of 25 on the roster.
Yeah, no,
But
they really don't. I mean, Eric Maynor, I think, is the oldest one. He's 26.
right, so I mean, you look at the roster up and down. I mean, if they lose him, I mean, they're not far from a D League team. Let's face it. And they make no bones about the fact that they want it to stink. Um, they make that's the whole thing about the NBA thinking about changing the rules and so forth. Uh, they they definitely. I'm not going to say they didn't try. I mean, they're the rookie of the year last year, but but looking at it, I mean, I look at some of the names on the rosters, and some of these guys. I'll be honest with you, I don't have a clue who they even are or where they even got them. And I don't know if you see any names on the roster that get you really excited beyond Noel. And, even Michael Carter Williams, in other years, he's not the rookie of the year, and he's got a lot to work on. He's very young, a point guard in this league. A lot of times they do come in, and offense is their biggest struggle. So, it'd be interesting to see where he goes, what he does. But beyond that, what do you see in this team? Do you
Well,
see anything?
I mean, I think their biggest weakness right now is shooting guard. I mean, that's when I'm looking at this team based on what they've put together, and I am going to bring Embiid into it a little bit because he is the future of the team, or he's going to be on this team in the future. You look at it, they have a one. Then if they move Thaddeus Young, that puts Embiid next year at power forward or center, and then Noel at the other one. So, I mean, the big gap right now for this team is a shooting guard. And unfortunately for the 76ers, and this is where it's really, hard to see what the next move is going to be, is there isn't a plethora of small, shooting guards out there that are good enough to really, most of them are like under the radar type guys that are very good at one specific thing. Whether it's a guy who's really good at shooting the three, or whether it's a guy who's really good at playing defense, or whatever it is, the team has gotten so interested in having, 2 point guards out there, or, two combo guards out there, that there isn't really any more defined shooting guards out on the floor, and that's what this team really needs with Michael Carter Williams' offensive struggles, is they need a guy who can go out there and absolutely fill it up, and that's a big thing that I think that they're going to struggle to find in the NBA right now.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. But it sounds like we're dumping on them a lot, but now we'll look at the future of this team and what they can do. And Philly's in great shape, as bad as it seems right now. I actually think they're in very good shape for the future moving forward. Like you said, definitely shooting guards, something they will need to improve on. Not sure where the power forward position is going to fall. If Young stays with the team, obviously he's the man this year, and not a bad transition. I think they're already looking to the future of Embiid and Noel playing together, twin towers once again. Michael Carter Williams, we're not exactly sure what he could do, but I mean, he was rookie of the year, and we always talk about your point guard and your center being the commodities in the league, and they're gonna have a ridiculous ton of cap space, and if they could pull a decent free agent the next couple years, who wants to play with this young up and coming team, they're going to be really scary, dangerous, because on top of everything they've got, they'll have they're going to have a very good pick next year, and they got Embiid coming out. So they already have next year's number one pick in Embiid coming out this year, and they already have a very high pick this year from last year being Nerlens Noel.
And not
So
to mention Michael Carter Williams, who's also very good.
exactly. So I mean, the future for the 76 is looking bright, and you know, going down the line, if they play their cards right, and they seem to, if their front offices do everything right, Hinky there, they're going to be a scary, scary good team, I think.
Well, I mean, the other thing, you did mention that Thaddeus Young, or if Thaddeus Young stays, he's going to be at power forward. But you've talked about, if he leaves, I don't think that they're necessarily in complete trouble. Actually, even this year, Joel Embiid not being on the court, I actually really like they have a center that played there last year, Henry Sims. I don't know if you caught any of the games where he played, but he actually looked pretty good for a guy that as you said, there are guys on this roster that I hadn't really heard too much about. And Henry Sims is one of those guys who, again, like he's a bench center, but and he's sort of undersized. He's only 6'10", but at the same time, when I watched him play, I saw a center who could score, and that was he's good at what he does, and he's a guy that I think could possibly step into that power forward spot, especially considering his size. I mean, he's small for a center, but 6'10" for a power forward is not that bad at all.
And how old is he? He's young
He's
too.
really
He's
young. Yeah,
23,
he's
I
really
think.
young.
23 years old. So, and like I said, every one of their players is no older than 23, 24, 25 years old. Very young team. I just think, moving forward, if I'm the GM of the 76ers right now, you're not going to expect to win this year. I think that's already a given. They're going to be a lousy team. I don't think there's any two ways about it. Um, but this is the time when you really got to sit down. You really have to investigate, Williams' game. You got to you got to make that decision. Is he going to be your point guard, for years to come? And like I say, if they play their cards right and free agency works out for them, they can be a real scary team. And I think the future is really bright for the 76ers. I think a team dropping to that lower level, being as bad as they were, and the way things have actually worked out, I think to their benefit with the injuries to Noel and Embiid, I think they're in much better shape than a team, just a couple steps ahead of them, say in the Celtics. I think they're in much better shape for the future. And I'd be way more excited to be a 76ers fan than a lot of teams out there right now if I'm patient.
Right, and that's really the key is that especially in Philly with the fans being what they are, notoriously impatient, notoriously rowdy, I think that those fans really need to remind themselves of what this team could be, and every single time they watch a game, instead of looking at the final box score, the final score of the game, look at what Nerlens Noel does. Look at what Michael Carter Williams does. Look at what the different pieces on this team are able to do, because that's where your excitement is going to come from. That because again, we're looking at a young team. We've said it a whole bunch already. This is a young team. Every single improvement that these guys are able to make is a sign of positive steps for the future. So if you're a fan of the 76ers, you definitely, I mean, yeah, Steve's right. It sounded a little bit like we were bagging on them a little bit, but this team has a really bright future, and as long as the franchise can stay patient, as long as the fans can stay patient, as long as the players can stay patient and actually stick with this team, because I can tell you right now, one of the worst situations these guys could get in is having one of those young guys who could develop into a star, like a Michael Carter Williams, like a Nerlens Noel, like a Joel Embiid, having one of those guys become dissatisfied with how slow it's taking this franchise to rebuild and holding out or demanding a trade. And one of those things happens, that's obviously a huge blow for this team. So it requires the players to stay patient as well.
Absolutely. Following some of their fan pages, I think the fans have bought into it, which is pretty surprising for Philadelphia fans. But I actually think they have bought into it. And you brought up a good point, something that I didn't think of. Is if one of these young guys, gets upset with the team, they don't like the direction it's going, and they do need to understand. I mean, it's not easy to win a championship in the NBA. Simple as that. It's not easy to win in any sport, and you need to have the patience, but you have to buy into the direction. And like you were saying, it's not about looking at the box score this season for that team. It doesn't have anything to do with Noel's individual stats or anything. What you want to see is what he's doing on the court, and is he going to improve his game? Is he going to improve from November to April? And if he can do that, if he can show that he is improving, and I think he's got the mentality to I think he's got the mentality to improve, to want to be better. I think he's been with the team a year. He hasn't obviously he hasn't played a minute in the NBA, so he's not going to trash talk the team right now. And I just over the summer league, I just really liked a lot about what I've seen with him. And he didn't put up the greatest stats in summer league, but he was one of the most impressive players in my opinion.
Well, I mean, the other thing with him is, when you're looking at a guy who was hurt in his first year, and as you said, this really was what made me think of it is, this is a guy that none of these guys know what it takes to win a championship in the NBA, and that's what scares me a little bit with this team, is that we've mentioned that like every single one of these guys is, they definitely have the youngest team in the NBA right now, and or it's going to be one of the closest to the youngest. It's got to be. So none of these guys knows what it takes to win a championship. Most of these guys were successful in college. So it's going to be, I think, an interesting dynamic to watch play out over the next few years is how patient these guys can be because you know, they don't have those vets coming in and showing them that, an NBA player really has to treat this more of a, I played college sports. I know how much time these guys put in. Okay? And to be fair, I didn't play a D1 sport, so that could be a totally different thing, but doing it on the professional level requires you to put in so many more hours than you see from anything else that these guys have ever experienced before, and they don't have anyone to show them that. And that's one of those things that scares me a little bit about the development. It would be nice if they brought in guys who have championship experience, not just vets. I'm not just talking those veteran guys, although, if you get the right attitude, sure, that might be something. But I'm talking a guy who has, and I don't even know who's out there that has this kind of pedigree, but somebody who's won a championship and who can show these guys the level of work, the amount of hours it takes, the amount of sweat you have to lose in order to get to the championship level. Because it doesn't really matter, what happens with the team or whatever. If they are not willing to put the work in together as a team, they're not going to get there.
Well, I'll agree with what you said. To a point, I'll agree upon the championship part because, one of the exceptions to the rule there that I'll throw out there real quick is Kevin Garnett. And when he came over to the Celtics, he brought a passion and a love for the game and a work ethic that nobody's seen before.
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
going to
But
go to
you just said exactly what the problem is with that. Is comparing any one of these guys to Kevin Garnett is like comparing any shooting guard coming out of the NBA draft to Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan.
Oh no,
It's an impossible thing to fill. Kevin
no,
Garnett is to emotion for the game what Kobe and MJ were for the skill level of the game.
Oh yeah, definitely. And don't get me wrong, I'm just saying there are some exceptions to the rule out there that it doesn't necessarily need to be, the championship player. But you have to have somebody that knows what it takes, the grind in the NBA, and like you touched upon a little bit, it is a little bit of a scary slope because, a couple of the things that can happen with this team that you never know is one of the things that happens with a team like that is they actually become accustomed to losing. And when losing, you need to have that edge. You need to have that competition. You need to have that fire. That fire inside the belly. And once you start getting accustomed to losing, it makes it easier to lose. And that's another thing that's a scary thing. And that's where you come into play and say, this is where you need to have somebody with that championship pedigree. And I looking at the roster up and down, I'm looking at it right now as a matter of fact, and there is really nobody on that team there's absolutely nobody on that team that can say, I've been through it all. I've seen it all. I know this is what you need to do because they don't know this is what you need to do.
Exactly. I mean,
And
the closest thing they have to that, and I mean, I'm seeing Jason Richardson on the roster, which he's probably the guy with the most experience. He's never won a championship. Like, again, they're lacking that particular component, and I'm not saying that he has to have won a championship. I'm just saying a guy that legitimately knows how to win. You know,
right.
um, and that's a problem with a lot of the young teams around the NBA right now, and it's something that they're gonna have to figure out how to fix because it's something that like a guy like you know I hate to say it because he does have two championships under his belt, but it's a hard thing for a guy like, you look at like LeBron, who right now is I believe 2 for 6 or 2 for 5 in his championship runs. And he's a guy that knows what it takes, but at the same time, early on in his career, he didn't know what it took. So you got to look at a guy more like a Tim Duncan or something like that, who legitimately knows. That guy is a true champion. He knows what it takes to get there, and that's the kind of player. And I'm not saying they're going to be able to go out and get a Tim Duncan, but they need a player that has seen that. A guy like Derek Fisher, who's sort of been a role player or a sort of a piece on a lot of those teams and knows what it takes, but somebody who's sort of out there in the league. And again, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head who would fill that role, but that's something that this team is missing for me. And it might be a good time, especially if they end up shipping out Thaddeus Young. Go get a power forward. Maybe, go get somebody who's out on the market who knows how to win. I'm sure there's some veteran out there that they can find who's not necessarily going to give them a ton of minutes, but who can show these young guys how to do it.
Expiring contract, the name that comes to mind, somebody who knows what it takes to win, Kendrick Perkins comes to mind. That's a name that comes to mind on that team. Talking about intensity, he's not the greatest player out there, but talking about intensity, talking about what it takes to battle in the league, that is somebody along that lines. And he's not a person to take the team into the future. You actually brought him up talking about the Celtics, that he may be a good fit with the Celtics. I think you were talking about that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it
And
was.
kind of the same thing. That's a name that comes to mind here a little bit, but along that lines, back in the day, like a Robert Ory. Put Robert Ory on your team, you're winning the championship anyway. So, um, but yeah, but all in all, with the talent, with the young talent they have, and the way you and I preach, about the big man and your point guard, um, I think the future could be right. But at the same time, you got to walk on eggshells a little bit to get there, because it can come crumbling down. They're taking a risk. They are taking the direction they went with this team. I honestly don't remember a team getting as blown up as the Sixers have, and they're taking a risk doing it. But you know what? There's a very high risk, but there could be a huge payoff in the future. We were talking about it before. I think even before the draft, with the picks that they had in the upcoming draft, how good this team actually could be in years to come. And
You know what team that I actually just thought of that made me think of how blown up this team has gotten? Because you said you hadn't really thought of one. Actually, the team that I can think of that got blown up on this level was the Cavaliers after LeBron left.
Okay, yeah, I'll buy that. Yep, they blew that team right up.
That was an atom bomb right there. That thing got blown all over the league.
And it did. And you know what? It was a few years. It was a few years, but they hung in there. They had a plan, and they may had a 4-year plan, and they might have known where this plan was going to end in 4 years. We don't know. Or had a good feeling that the plan was going to end this way.
I don't know. I think after that letter that Gilbert wrote, I don't think he was really planning on LeBron coming back.
I got some conspiracy theories, but no. But honestly, in a move like that, picking up, now you're not going to pick up the greatest player on the planet like the Cavs just did, but but at the same time, they're in a position that they're going to be able to dump boatloads of money on free agents. Now it's going to be up to the free agent if they want to go play there, and that free agent once again gets back into the mold of you need to be patient, because before the Kevin Love deal, which is not a deal yet, but it's for all intensive purposes a deal, LeBron even came out and said, this is going to take some time. Just expect that this is going to take some time. Now that's all that's changed, and I'm going to kick it back to you because it's probably a good transition. Probably, unless you got something else on the 76ers here, to maybe get into a little bit of that Kevin Love deal.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely, that's what I was thinking is going right into that transition. Um, So the Kevin Love thing is a very, obviously it has an impact that's league wide, and up until now, I've been having conversations with friends. We go and play basketball or whatever, and we of course start talking about who's going to win this team, who's going to win this conference, who's going to win that conference, all that stuff, and up until the Kevin Love trade, every single person I talked to said that it was going to be the Bulls. Derrick Rose is looking great with Team USA right now. Pau Gasol being there, Joakim Noah, Jimmy Butler. That team has just it has a good. They have a good team. Especially if Doug McDermott can do anything near what he was doing in the summer league. He's a scorer. Scorers can be very consistent as far as how that transfers. So, especially with how much attention other people are going to draw, he's going to get some wide open shots. So if he can turn into a starter, he can turn into that starting small forward for them. That team is really dangerous. But every single person after the Kevin Love trade became official immediately said, well, now it's going to be the Cavaliers. And there's a really good reason why. I mean, you look at, how this team breaks down with, how good Kevin Love is. I mean, the thing that a lot of people don't realize, he gets bagged on a lot for his defense. But at the same time, if you look at, I'm a big advanced statistics guy, and anyone can look at anything, any of the numbers out there. But honestly, the most important number is how many wins a player is directly responsible for. And they have the win share statistic for that, which is accumulation of their offensive win shares and their defensive win shares. Kevin Love is actually the third best player in the NBA according to that statistic, behind Kevin Durant and LeBron James. No team has ever had two players in the top 5 of that statistic in the NBA on the same team at the same time.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, and again, like going back to that defensive thing, I've heard so many concerns over Kevin Love's defense. Well, Kevin Love, as far as statistics go, and you can watch the tape all you want. I honestly, I never really saw why people hated on him for his defense. People I understood that James Harden, people going after James Harden for his defense. I understand a little bit of Stephen Curry gets bagged on a little bit for his defense. I've never really understood the Kevin Love defense thing, because not only do you watch him on tape and he gets a lot of rebounds, and as any basketball coach will tell you, no defensive possession ends until the rebound is gotten. And because he gets so many rebounds, he's responsible for ending a lot of defensive possessions. So that's huge. But his statistics actually back up the fact that he's actually a pretty decent defensive player. He's actually ranked 27th in the league according to defensive win shares, which, again, that's not a bad player. That places him above LeBron James, above Andre Drummond, and above the guy who he's basically replacing in Cleveland and Chris Bosh. So he's definitely a better defender than a lot of people think. He's one of the top 5 players in the NBA right now, and having him and LeBron on the same team is just going to be absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there, and you look at it. One of the things that I think people look at, they'll just look at the numbers alone, and he's averaging about a half a block a game. And a lot of times you look at block numbers out of your big men and so forth, but defensively, like you said, you're digging deeper in, and there is numbers don't tell a defensive story always. And I think a lot of people out there are actually talking a lot without actually seeing him play all that often. I mean, honestly, how often does the regular average Joe get to watch Minnesota play? They're not on national TV. If you go league pass, something like that, sure. But you don't really get the opportunity to watch Minnesota play all that much. I mean, you're talking a guy he's a 2010 guy. So, I mean, how can that not be a huge asset to any team? And like you said, no doubt about it, he's the top 5 player in the league. And, Cleveland definitely picked up a score. The time is now for them to win. I got a question for you, though. Would you do the trade? Would you pick up Kevin Love?
we've had this conversation before. You know, and you know, back when we had this conversation, I said it depends on what the owner wants you to do. Does the owner want you to win now, or does he want you to win? You know, build a dynasty. And I said that you don't do the trade if you want the dynasty. You do the trade if you don't. I've actually gone deeper into it since. Actually, mostly doing research because we knew we were going to be talking about this once that news dropped. I did a lot of research into it. Kevin Love is actually grading out as what you would expect a number one pick to be. So if you look at, you know, there's a great article actually out there on 82games.com where they break down the rating for, you know, whether a player is a star, whether he's a solid player, a role player, bench player, whatever. Based on his draft positioning, and they've broken it down based on all the drafts that, you know, have happened, and they see, you know, how good that first round pick, you know, number one overall pick actually was, how good that third overall pick actually was. This is a great article. I recommend everyone check it out. But one of the things to look at is that they basically break it down over the first 5 seasons and how much of an impact a player has in those 5 seasons, you know, based on, you know, how his how high he was taken. So they expect a player to have, and again, I'm looking at win shares. I love the win shares number. I think it's one of the big ones. And if you look at the win shares, most of the, you know, what you would expect a number one overall pick to get you is a win share percentage in the 30s. You know, over 5 years, you want them to account for 30 or more win shares. He's produced 32.7 win shares right now, which it's 33.9 is the expected number for a first overall pick. So Kevin Love is right there. All right. Now, 30% of the time, that number one overall pick doesn't reach that level. And Andrew Wiggins isn't there yet. Okay, we haven't seen Andrew Wiggins play a single actual NBA game. Now, to be fair, and we're talking a lot about the Cavaliers side of things, I would also make this trade if I was in the Wolves front office. Because if I'm building a team that I want to say, okay, we're going to go into the playoffs and, you know, contend in the future, Andrew Wiggins is a guy that I have to go get. Because pairing him with Rubio and Levine, Pekovic, who plays great defense down low, that team that's a team that runs. And now the Wolves ran before, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, another point that I was going to get to is that actually going out and getting Kevin Love, he fits better with LeBron than a lot of people thought. Kevin Love, if you actually watch tape of Kevin Love play, you know, I went back and I watched some of the Kevin Love film from this past year. He plays a lot faster than people think. You know, I've actually had this conversation with somebody about how, you know, well, you know, he's more of a shooter. Like, is that really going to mesh with LeBron? Because LeBron doesn't really have anyone to run the fast break with other than Kyrie. You know, all those concerns. Kevin Love plays, you know, when he's out on the floor, he plays at a pace at 107 possessions per 100, which is like, you know, 20 years ago in the NBA, not the NBA that's played today, which is so turnover concerned.
I agree.
So, what about you? Would you do the trade?
You know, the more I think about it, I'm more in line with what you are right now because I actually, at the beginning, I definitely didn't want it. We talked about it 3 weeks ago. We talked about it 6 weeks ago. I didn't want it to happen, and that's kind of just the fan in me really wanting to see LeBron running with Wiggins. But the trade definitely makes sense for the Wolves. Absolutely. Because, you know, they're another team that they're rebuilding. They've shown an ineptitude from their upper offices, though. So what they can do with it remains to be seen. Now, Wiggins to me is actually a perfect candidate for one of those players to get disgruntled and want out after 3 years. If that team doesn't get any better. Now, just something that I was talking about a little bit earlier, and, you know, this is all hearsay, But according to reports out there, what the deal's going to be is Thaddeus Young, which is going to be get traded to the Wolves, and Bennett will be going over to the Sixers in that deal. So if something along that, I guess it has to do with salary cap and so forth. If that goes down, so a lot that we're talking about right now is speculation. But one of the things, you're not going to be speculating is on the Cavaliers. That team now is pretty much come into focus, and they are right now they are either 1A or 1B with Chicago. I'll agree. Those are definitely the elites team, and it's definitely by him coming over and getting a player as good as Kevin Love is, that definitely shifts the balance a little bit more to the East. The West is still a much better conference, but you can see the East getting better, and that's good to see. So, you can see that rotation lining up here. It looks like now reports have come out today. Who knows how true anything is until it happens, but reports are out that it looks like Ray Allen does want to play at least one more year, and that 1 year is going to be in Cleveland, which I think is another great pickup. I mean, you're getting the Heat north. You're gonna have Mike Miller. You're gonna have James Jones on that team, um, and they are a very, very good team. Now, the one thing I'm looking at this season is in who ends up with the number one seed. And once again, I say this every time we talk about Chicago, every single time I say this, but with a healthy Derrick Rose. And with a healthy Derrick Rose, that team's going to be very good. And I think what's really going to decide who finishes one in the conference next year is how much time it's going to take for Cleveland to gel as a team. So, while Chicago, they pick up Paul Gasol, it's not going to take them nearly as long to gel. So if they're picking up wins in November and December, early December, and throughout November, that could be enough wins to put them as the number one seed out there. That means nothing come. If you're talking 1-2 seed, that means nothing come the playoffs. And right
Oh
now,
yeah, I mean, look at what happened with Indiana and Miami this year in the playoffs.
exactly, and it was almost the same deal that Indiana started out with and that's what got me thinking about it a little bit because Indiana got such a hot start last year, and we all know how that ended. So, so I can see Chicago finishing one because I think they will start off the season better than Cleveland because it's good. You can have the greatest player in the world, but there is that familiarity. There's getting to know each other. The whole Spurs way of knowing where everybody is on the court at all times. So there is going to be a little bit of learning curve, learning to play along with each other, and it would have been. I think it would have been great to see LeBron James actually lead young guys like Wiggins and Bennett. I would have liked to see that because I actually think Bennett's going to be a better player than most people project him to be. He had an awful rookie season for a number one pick. But I think he's going to turn out to be a decent player. All star, I'm not sure of. But I think he'll be a decent player in the league. So I think the Wolves definitely make out in the deal. I think they do great in the deal. Don't screw it up from here. And I put Cleveland right in the talk of definitely a finals contender, definitely, no doubt
So
about it.
I have a question for you. Um, where, how do you think that this whole trade is going to impact? What do you think about Melo's decision to go back to New York now? And how do you think this trade is going to impact future free agent classes? Because one of the things that I liked so much, you were talking about liking to see the idea of, or liking the idea of LeBron leading young guys. One of the things that I liked about how this team was built was that it was bringing parity back to the NBA. It was bringing back the idea that two superstars were on every team, or were on a lot of teams, and that it was going to be more of a league of watching two guys compete with each other. It was going to be watching, Kobe and Shaq against so and so. It was going to be Stockton and Malone. It was going to be Jordan and Pippen. It was going to be a two-star league. And now that this trade has gone down, it's almost an arms race to see, not just for the, front offices around here, but so many players who haven't won a ring yet. What does that mean for them? Guys who think that, a ring defines their legacy. What does that mean? I mean, I hate to say it because I know that it's so far out as far as like where he's going to go, but what do you think it means for KD, the rumors of KD going to Washington or even staying in Oklahoma City? I think he's got to go find a team at this point that he can win with. And like Melo's decision looks absolutely awful now because I don't see Melo winning a ring at any point in his career now that those two teams have been put together, the Bulls and the Cavaliers, because the Cavaliers are going to be good for the next half decade. The Bulls are going to be good for at least the next 2 years. I can't see the Knicks ever becoming contenders in that situation. I can't see any team, I look out west, I can't see any team out west being able to be, except for the Spurs because they play literally like, as a 10-person team. I can't see any other team out in the West having enough superstars to contend with either one of those teams come the finals. So, what do you think that means for future free agent classes?
Well, it's strange. It's a little bit scary in a way, and as many times, see the problem that I see with what's going on here, and like we said, Cleveland is going to be good for the next 6 years, 5 6 years, definitely, just with the talent that they have on the team. That they definitely going to be a very good team, and obviously as a free agent, yes, you want to go win, and we don't know the ins and outs, and we don't know what was said to LeBron James, and we don't know, if there was a deal before LeBron James even came that he had a pretty good hunch, a 90% feeling that Kevin Love was going to play on this team. We have no idea what the ins and outs of that is, so I'm not even about to speculate there. Uh, but it is, I mean, I can definitely see, and once again, I'll go back to teams getting bred into accepting losing, and I don't like to see that. And it does take parity. It definitely takes parity out of the league. Now, what's going to change that? I think what's going to change that is a lot of teams picking up the mold, trying to at least pick up the mold of the Spurs and trying to do things the way they do it. Because for as many great stories, the Heat went out, and I don't care, there's no possible way anybody can say LeBron James' years in Miami were a failure. You win 2 out of 4, you get there 4 times, you are not failing. I think people like to dump on him because it was not 3, not 4, not 5, and that didn't work out. So be it. But as many stories as there are the Heat and so forth, I'll take your team, the Rockets. They're a team that is constantly going for it. They go for it. That's something they try to do, but a lot of times that can backfire in your face. And as good as the talent on a team like the Rockets are, like you say, you can admit the fact that the Rockets can't compete with Cleveland. I don't think I couldn't see if the Rockets made it to the finals. I don't see them beating a team like Cleveland, and they've got two bona fide superstars on that team. So we're getting to a point where once again it's down to 3 superstars, or 2 superstars and one very good player. In this case being Kyrie Irving, and you need to make it work financially and so forth. I don't like it per se. I'd much rather see a team like the Spurs, somebody that you can look at players who are a good fit on the team, instead of getting the best players. Now, that being said, one of the reasons I think Cavaliers are going to be so good is I look at this team, even as constituted, you can see very good fits on this team. Like you said, you think LeBron and Kevin Love is going to play very well together. LeBron James automatically makes Varejao a better player on the court because of the familiarity. They're very tight. I don't think I'll have any issues playing with Irvin, so I think this team will be able to mesh well together, but it doesn't always work out that way. So, is maybe a young player, and I can see, I think a lot of what free agents' decisions are going to be in the future is exactly what's going to happen with Kevin Durant. And I think that's why so many people are talking about that right now. What is he going to do? Because his options are going to be stay where he is, and you got to admit they've got a very good team. They've got a well-run organization there. So staying there wouldn't be the worst thing. He could jump onto one of these
I
mega
just gotta
super
hop in there
teams.
real fast. I do not
Yeah,
think
go
the
ahead.
Oklahoma City Thunder is a well run organization. I think that they have Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, and they went out and got a really good coach in Scott Brooks. But at the end of the day, that team is about saving money instead of winning. I hate to say it, but imagine right now, just take a second and go into fantasy land here, and imagine if they were willing to spend $5 million more and keep Westbrook, Harden, and Durant on the same team.
You got me there. You got me there. Um, there are worse. Well, let's put it this way: there are definitely worse teams running the NBA. But yeah, you got me. I mean, if we're talking a number of about 5 million, yeah, you got me there because they would be. But think about it: if they did, that one move right there would have been a move that they built that team up, and it would have been a team that other teams will look and say, "Wow, man, damn, they did a really good job building that team up."
Yeah, but they didn't. That's why I'm saying that they're
Right.
not a well run team.
That's why I'll buy that. That's why I will buy that because they would be scary good at this point.
They would have won a
Definitely.
championship by now if they had kept Harden on board and run him with those two guys. I mean, I don't care about his defense. At the end of the day, those three guys are going to be dropping like 95 points alone. You get 10 points from anyone else. That's 105 points a game.
And you got
Like,
Ibaka being one of the most underrated players out there.
yeah, Ibaka
People,
goes off for 20 points every night.
yeah. I mean, people. I think he definitely is one of the most underrated players out there. But what I'm saying is, I think a lot's gonna, depend upon what he decides to do. Is he gonna go to that mega team? Is he gonna look at a team? I doubt it, but is he gonna look like a team in a couple years, like the 76ers, and say, geez, if I went to that team, imagine what they could be. Imagine what we could do at this point. There's always that option, and then of course there's option going home and one of the teams that worked their way out of that getting used to losing and actually following course, and I think they've done a very good job, and I think the winning last year helps them, is Washington. That's one of the teams that's one of the teams I like a lot. I like Washington as a team, and unfortunately for Washington, with the balance of power shifting the way it has to Cleveland in Chicago being so dominant right now, it puts them in a really tough position to have hopes, and that's one of the reasons why I don't like. I'm much more of a fan of parity in the league. I want all 8 teams, or at least your top 6, to have a chance. I mean, it never happens, but even your 4 or 5 teams to have a chance to make a run at the championship.
Oh, I mean, I
It,
think that a league that both of us would idolize for is a team where both conferences look like the Western Conference from last year, where you're going and you're watching every single playoff game from the Western Conference playoffs, whether it's round one or round three, just because it's such good basketball. I mean, literally every I want you watch the Eastern Conference playoffs, and it's like there are so many teams that were I don't want to say like they were 4 and out. There were like a number of series like that out west. Every single series was a good series, and it was it ended up sort of petering out a little bit actually as the playoffs went on. But I think it was because the Western Conference teams were beating each other up so much. But you look at that first round, and that's the kind of round that I envision, where you've got the 5 and the 4 seeds going until games game 7 or whatever. That's the kind of NBA that I would like to see, because every single team could be competitive.
well, I definitely think in the East. I think the East has made huge strides this year. Now Indiana, um, unfortunately for them, this is going to be a lost season for Indiana. right now. Things went horribly bad for them this week. So they fall out of the conversation, which I don't think people were even buying too much stock into how good they are. But we've had the conversation. When you look beyond Cleveland, you look beyond Chicago, and you look at Miami Heat, they are still a pretty decent team. They're not an awful team. So I do think the balance has changed. I mentioned Washington, a team I like. Toronto's another team. So I think it has definitely gotten better. Charlotte's a decent team. So the East, the landscape is changing a little bit. The West is still definitely a better conference. But, it's funny. One player comes over. One player comes over and there's been a lot of change. You haven't seen a huge amount of huge names, free agency beyond obviously the huge ones this year. Um, and a team like a team like the Knicks, I mean, I think we had them slated at maybe an 8 seed at best. They're not going to win. I don't think I'll agree with you. I don't think Carmelo is going to win a championship, especially when you have a powerhouse like Cleveland. That team could have been Miami for the next possibly could have been Miami for the next 5 years.
Right, and I
Um,
mean, you look at like Melo's decision. That's exactly what I mean. Like from a free agency perspective, it's just going to be interesting to watch how it changes players' decisions, especially the superstars. Because right now, you think about what could be if Melo is in Houston, or if he's in Chicago right now. Like those, he has a legitimate chance of winning a title now. And I think that up until Kevin Love went to Cleveland, I don't want to say he had a legitimate shot, but there was obviously a much larger chance of him winning a title. Now, with again, the powerhouse being built in Cleveland, and I think the Bulls, until they lose Powell, are going to be competitive, for the next couple of years. I don't ever see New York getting to that level.
right, right. So you know, I would definitely say that as a fan, I'm not a huge as a fan, I'm not huge on the deal because I just really wanted to see what that team could do. I'm always so interested in seeing what a young team can do to turn things around. I love watching young players play and to see young players play with the greatest. Now, as a GM, I mean, the fact of the matter is they kind of had to make that deal because if you have a chance to win, you have to go for it. I don't. There's no two ways about it. And when you're Cleveland, I mean, you've got to try 10 times as hard to go for it, because whichever team in Cleveland wins a championship, it's just going to be something just not even seen in the majority of people's lifetimes. So that's huge. And if they have an opportunity to pick up a top five, top three possible player in the NBA, um, they had to go for it. And I mean, that's just they're going to be a scary, scary good team. And as I'm the GM, and I look at it that way, and like you said, 6 years. LeBron James still has a lot of. I mean, he's put on a lot of miles, but he's got a lot of miles left in him. He's not going anywhere for a few years. Kevin Love still young. Kyrie Irving young. So the funny thing is, we're still talking a fairly young team out there. And the key question at this point is, well, when you get a three-headed monster like that, what are the other players you can surround them with? Because you still need to put together a decent bench, and you still need to have a solid, um, you need to have solid role players on the team, or you can have three great players, and it doesn't necessarily work. There's been many teams throughout the years that have had three great players and haven't won a thing.
Well, let's
So
actually transition a little bit since we're sort of running close on time. One of the teams that were out there that had three great players on it were the Warriors, and they just had a guy that was voted into the Hall of Fame. Steve absolutely knows more about the Hall of Fame, being an older fan than I am. He knows a lot more about the Hall of Fame. He's actually seen most of these guys play, has a story with all of them. So, I just sort of want to hear his thoughts on the recent Hall of Fame class, and what each of these guys meant, because I know me personally, I had never really heard of. I can't even pronounce his name, Marcelonis. Um, I read a couple good articles on him over the last couple weeks. But him and Mitch Richmond seem like guys who I don't want to say don't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, but as a guy that never really saw those guys play and you know is pretty much looking at stats, maybe some highlight videos, not actually looking at their games. They don't seem necessarily that they deserve it. Mitch Richmond seems like the best contribution he ever made to the Kings was getting traded to uh,
He
whatever
ended
team it
up
was.
playing. He ended up playing for Washington for a couple of years.
Yeah, and Chris Webber went to Sacramento, which actually got them to a conference championship, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, I mean that's why after Weber went there, they definitely became better. You see, the thing about Mitch Richmond is, a lot is goes into his first couple years in the league when he was with Golden State. When he was with Hardaway and Mullen, and unfortunately they couldn't keep that team together. When he ended up leaving, going to Sacramento, which was an awful situation for him. Um, if you just take a look at his stats alone, it doesn't really tell the story about the teammate that he was. When he was, and you actually look at some of his other numbers, rebounding, his assists, and so forth, as his career went on, those numbers went down. But he was playing for some really, he was not playing for good teams at that time. He was about, honestly, he was quite far throughout his career from being a champion. So, there's nothing really saying that there was that you need to be a champion to end up in the Hall of Fame. But if you saw his game and you saw him play a good amount of the time, which, back then, especially in Golden State, and I actually had a chance to watch him a good amount of the time because he played out west when he was younger in his career. So there'd be a lot of the second half of the TNT doubleheaders way back when, and I saw him play. He was a very consistent player. He was a 23 point player a game. He had beautiful offensive game. He didn't have the best numbers when it came to assists. When it came, his assist numbers actually dropped, like I said, throughout his career a little bit. Rebounding numbers, I mean, he wasn't a big guy, but once again, they dropped. But he was a real exciting player to watch, and he's one of those players that you can play that what if game with Mitch Richmond, and the question is, what if he played on a really good team? What if he played on a championship team? And if he played on a really good team and he fit in, he could play easily in today's game. And I mean, you put him on one of the better teams today, and he would be. Let's say, you wouldn't even be able to put him on Cleveland only due to salary and so forth. Um, but his overall game, and you break down some of his ratings, and you really break down. You can't put in. You were mentioned earlier in the show about wins and what you do for the team, but I mean, he just played for some god awful teams. But to watch him play, and I enjoyed watching him so much. Probably one of the reasons why I don't have an issue with him going into the Hall of Fame. He was definitely a borderline player getting there. It took him a few years to get there. But to watch him play, and if you ever have the opportunity, and these opportunities are definitely coming up more and more and being more available, but if you ever have an opportunity to actually watch a couple of his early games, his rookie second year when he was with Golden State, and you watch that team run together, you might see, if you're able to watch full games along the line somewhere, do it, because you'll see what I actually seen in them.
Well, I
Um,
mean, okay, so here's my question is you're looking at a guy like that, and you said that like what he could be, and you've talked a lot about like what he could be. Well, I mean, if you're gonna play that game, like Greg Oden is a Hall of Famer because he could have been an amazing player because coming out of college he looks so amazing.
No, no.
What?
What I'll say to that is that's kind of off base a little bit because what I'm going to say to that is not what he could be because he was that good player, and every year he played, he was that good player. He was that consistent 20 plus scorer a night. Um, he was that very good player, but I think he'd have been. I think his numbers would have been better if he had played on better teams, if he had better coaching and so forth. I definitely think his numbers would have been better, and I think he would have been more revered is one of the better shooting guards out there. That's what I mean about what he could be if he had played back in those years, with teams on like the Lakers or whatnot. I just think he would have been much more revered as a player. And it actually surprised me when you said you didn't even know of him. And it's funny, I think I brought him up a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, before I even thought of him in the Hall of Fame. And you didn't even really know that much about him. But if you get an opportunity, they're showing it on, I believe it's on NBA TV right now, but they've been showing the story about that Golden State Warriors team. If you get an opportunity, check it out, and maybe you'll see a little bit what I got to see. And he was one of my favorite players, and he was just I loved watching him play. I loved the way he played the game, um, and rolling into loving how somebody plays the game. A guy I have much love for, and a guy that I absolutely loved through his whole career, and I was a huge fan, is Alonzo Mourning. Um, last night I sat there, I watched his speech, and it was something that I was really, really, you know, I just like, he looks like he could come out and play today, as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact, he joked last night that Pat Riley worked him so hard and worked him so hard in practice. So if he didn't do that, he'd still be playing today. And he looked like he could come out and play today 5 years later. But Alonzo Mourning, great story. He had the tenacity. He had that type of work ethic. That I've been trying to think of comparison, and the comparison that I come up with over and over again is Kevin Garnett. He just had that enthusiasm, that love of the game. That he was a real hard worker, and another player that I just love to watch. And we've been seeing the stories, especially obviously this week. We've been seeing the stories about how he had missed the season there in 2002 because of kidney disease. He shouldn't even have come back to the NBA after that. And was he the same player? No, definitely not. He
And see,
definitely.
unfortunately, that's the Alonzo Mourning that I remember because that's when I really started watching the NBA. Was right around that time. When T Mac and Kobe were becoming, the new phenoms in the NBA, and that's the Alonzo Mourning that I remember. And I actually caught a game on the what you were talking about on the NBA Hardtop, which was on NBA TV, and I saw him hit a game-winning shot in a playoff game. It was a game 5. I forget what team they were playing against, and it was just like I could find Alonzo Mourning on the court every single time that they would go up and down the floor. And I started watching the game at like halftime or whatever. I'd just gotten back from work, and again I could just go I could look down for a second and I could look up and I would immediately know who he was, because you're right. I mean, he was always fighting. I have absolutely no problem with him going in after watching that, because I knew the Alonzo Mourning from after his kidney thing, and watching him play from before that was just it was an absolute treat.
Yeah, definitely. He was under, and he played so much bigger than he was. And you think of the players back then. We see the players today with the conditioning and all that, and that's one of the reasons why it's nearly impossible. And I mean, Alonzo Mourning's not that far. He's only 5 years removed from the league, anyways. But when you look at his conditioning and so forth, the way you could tell he spent many hours in the gym, and he was an undersized big man. I mean, he was 6'10". He was not the biggest guy out there. He had to fight and scrap for everything he got out there, and that's what I honestly loved about his game. Just the way he fought and scrapped. There's something I actually didn't know until honestly a couple nights ago, but I was watching the John Thompson interview with him, and basically the question was what got him to the point that he knew he wanted to be a basketball player, or what was that push that made him say, "Geez, I'm going to be an NBA basketball player." And as he was a big, he was a big kid growing up, and he mentioned what got him to love basketball was watching Patrick Ewing play for Georgetown, and Patrick Ewing was another player right in that mold. And Patrick Ewing turned around and mentored Alonzo Mourning pretty much, through college his whole career, and it was that same type of just hard-nosed tenacity. And when you have somebody like that, they can be, and Alonzo Mourning wasn't, but they can be lacking in skill and so forth, and they can make up for it. And he was one of those people who made up for his undersizedness. And I had the pleasure of actually seeing him play in person a few times, and and I actually, um, watching him play, I remember I had seen him play. I saw him play the Celtics when he was with Charlotte, and I saw him a few times when he was playing for Miami. And he's you're just naturally prone to wanting to watch him on the court. There was something about the way that he played. He just had this game and this tenacity about him. Um, you know, take Garnett and make Garnett actually even better. And that's what Alonzo Mourning was in that first half of his career there. He had the numbers to back it up. We didn't put up these gaudy numbers, these ridiculous numbers, but he was another 2010 guy. And just watching him play and things at the box score and things that your stats in years to come, and all you do is look at stats, won't tell the whole story on him. And just the fact that he came back and after the kidney disease, and he came back and played, and he wasn't nearly obviously he wasn't nearly the same player again. And he was definitely in limited minutes and so forth when he did come back. But to actually see him come back and play 15, 20 minutes a game, and when he was in there for those 15, 20 minutes a game, he produced, and he was still that type of player. It's just that his body couldn't handle, playing the amount of minutes that he was used to playing. So really, I knew he was going in. That was definitely a lock. Beyond those two guys, the only other person that I really had interest in, and I think in another podcast I'd like to talk about him a little bit more because, hopefully people don't see the bad stuff, but I'd like people to see a lot because he's done so much good, and I actually think he's one of the best commissioners in all sports of all time, David Stern, going in last night, and you know, just another guy that I would actually like to touch upon, with a further time, be it in one of our podcasts or possibly one of the articles that we put out on our website there. But those three were the three that I was really interested in seeing last night. I'll be honest, I don't follow the women's game so much. I don't follow the international. Marcelonis was another decent player. He's actually a guy that I'm actually a little surprised that he got in, and I think one of the biggest reasons that he ended up getting into the Hall of Fame is just because he was that international player.
Well,
But
actually, if I can just chime in real fast on him, I read a great article on him. I believe it was actually on NBA.com, which went into more of the reason of why he was picked, because I had no idea, and I literally straight up Googled why was he in the Hall of Fame, or why was he on the ballot or whatever. Because again, like, as a guy who never really saw him play, I went back and looked at the stats, and it was like, this guy scored 4,000 career points. Like, what are we doing? And one of the things that really got me about his story was that he came over and played right at the fall of the Soviet Union. And
Right.
what he did for, because in Russia at the time, because it was such a, it was a communist country on that level, professional athletes actually all played for one agency. So it'd be like, every player in the NBA and in the NFL and in the Major League Baseball all having one agent, and it was the government. So what he did by setting the precedent for Russian players to come over and play in the NBA, and actually, sort of broke away from the Russian team, went back and started. I believe he helped to start the Lithuanian national team after Lithuania declared independence. What he did for international basketball was absolutely incredible. He was definitely a pioneer. From a pure skills perspective or a pure stats perspective, yeah, I don't think that he deserved to be in it at all. But
Oh yeah,
watching,
definitely not.
reading that article and reading more about the fact that he was such a trailblazer, it actually, like, it made me a little emotional. I don't want to say like it brought tears to my eyes, but it was absolutely incredible the level of pressure that he was under, and what he had to do in order to break out of what the Soviet Union wanted him to do, to go and play overseas.
One of the things the NBA does very, very well is they recognize, it isn't always about what's done on the court, and it's not always players. They recognize the people um, who have a hand in making the NBA, a great league. They're always one to recognize those players. And be it players or whatnot. But the Hall of Fame, the Basketball Hall of Fame, really does a good job in looking at what people bring to the actual game of the basketball. Not only NBA, but like you say, international ball. You get a lot of international players get into the Hall of Fame, and I'll be honest with you. I don't know a ton about the international game beyond the huge names that never made it to the NBA. But he came over, like you said, came over from Russia. That was right at that time when all that was happening. The Cold War's ending, all that's going on, and he was still a decent player. Good enough to go into the Hall. No, he wouldn't have got in on his basketball merits. Definitely not. But once again, just another guy who, from what he brought to the game of basketball, absolutely deserves to be in the NBA, in the Hall of Fame, I should say, and along with David Stern there. So, it wasn't the most exciting. Before I stop on the Hall of Fame, one real quick point, and I haven't seen this brought up, and maybe this is just me, and maybe this is just the old timer in me. And I know you got a couple points you want to get to right here, but very, very quick. One thing that bothered me a little bit last night is LeBron James has a rally, and I know it was for his cause and so forth, but it was really him coming back to Cleveland. Let's face it, that's what it was about. And when does he do it? But he does it on Hall of Fame night. So all his fans come out, they watch LeBron James, and nobody's paying attention to the history of the game and the stories that you hear during some of the Hall of Fame speeches and so forth. And that's just something that I just found a little bit odd to me, that all goes down on the same night that these guys are getting inducted to the Hall of Fame. And it's just something I wasn't happy to see that go down last night. And I haven't, saw it brought up, and it's not going to be anything that's got me hating LeBron James for the rest of my life or anything like that. But I don't know, it just tweaked me the wrong way a little bit. But, that's pretty much what I got on the Hall of Fame and so forth right now.
Well, talking about, you ended on something that tweaked you a little bit the wrong way. I really have one thing that I want to talk about before we wrap up tonight, and that, again, I know I'm a Rockets fan, and Steve and I have actually talked off mic about trying to keep our personal you know opinions about our favorite teams. For him it's the Celtics, for me it's the Rockets. Trying to keep those things away from influencing this a little bit, trying to stay more objective. And I don't do a very good job of it because I am so invested in that team, but it for me, the recent stuff that happened, in the news media about James Harden, Dwight Howard, absolutely brought up something that is actually, really frustrates me about sports reporting right now, and pretty much it can be summed up by Bleacher Report. I I absolutely hate Bleacher Report. If anyone from there is listening, this is me calling you out because the only purpose of that site is to get clicks. That's it. They just want views. They aren't trying to write anything substantive. They aren't trying to do anything to, be a trailblazer. And they have such a wide platform that they have the ability to reach so many people. There's, actually, they come up every single time you Google anything to do with basketball. One of the first hits is Bleacher Report. And they have the ability to become, a very good outlet for sports reporting. And instead, they don't do anything substantive. And not only that, but with this recent news thing about, Monty Eunice saying that Harden and Howard eat separately from the team. That to me just because they totally misquoted him. They completely misquoted him. You can actually go out and find the actual quote online. All he said was that they eat different food. That's it. That is all he said. And for me, the thing that really, really gets me is that I was seeing, on Twitter and on, national news outlets for sports, they were talking about that piece of news. And they were going into the fact that, that all of this, oh, this means they're terrible leaders. Oh, this is why free agents weren't going to Houston. This, that, and the other thing. And for me, that was something that really, really upset me as a sports fan. So all I ask is that, if you are a media type person, go out and find the actual quote before you trust, especially anything written on Bleacher Report. Because when you go out and you make a big case, it can turn into a wildfire really quickly, and it can spread so fast. And what happens is that distracts from the game. As somebody who coaches, somebody who plays the game, dealing with those kind of off the court distractions, where now suddenly those two guys have to showcase the fact that they're a leader, so that these young guys who are coming in and don't know them, or guys they just signed, a guy from an overseas guy, and he's coming over and he hasn't met them before, and all he's doing is seeing articles like this out there. That's the kind of thing that does make free agents not want to go to Houston. So, us as fans, people who are in the media, make sure that you actually, do your background research, because it was completely misquoted. And honestly, for me, as a Houston fan, the thing that concerns me the most about that entire article was the fact that Dwight Howard and James Harden eat fast food. That was the most concerning thing, because once I actually, at first when I saw the headline or whatever, it was shared by somebody on Facebook. I was like, wow, like that'd be terrible. And I turned to a friend of mine and I showed him the headline, and I was like, wow, this is really bad. And I immediately went and Googled it, and within the first couple hits, I actually found the actual quote, and I was like, oh, this isn't at all what they said, and this is ridiculous. And again, that's just my big issue. It shouldn't be about sensationalism. It shouldn't be about getting the first word out there. It should be about saying something deep and saying something meaningful. And whether it means blazing, being a trailblazer like these guys that we're talking about going into the Hall of Fame, guys like Marcelinus, who is going to the Hall of Fame because he was a trailblazer and broke away from his entire government to go play basketball in the NBA. Instead of just being a sheep, actually find the original quote and say what really happened. Because, again, the big news there should not be that they eat separately from their team. Because those two guys, if you are a Rockets fan, You see their Instagram, you see their Twitter feeds. Those guys are close with their team. They're always taking pictures with the team. They're always having fun. I think that they're really involved. I don't necessarily think that they're fantastic leaders because, again, Dwight is very fun loving. But saying that they're aloof or saying that they're separate from their team is just feeding into this cycle where the media is becoming more of a distraction than it deserves. So, again, all I want to say is just do that background research, stay focused, and as fans, take what you read on Bleacher Report with a grain of salt because this is a great scenario where it's just inaccurate.
Well, I'm just going to follow that up real quickly because I know we're running long tonight, but very quickly, I'm just going to follow that up with the other issue that you have there is not even so much Bleacher Report, although they're one of the biggest issues out there when it comes to things like that, but it's all the rest of the news media outlet picking up their stories because how many stories do we read that start out with according to reports from Bleacher Report? And this is just the short term. This is America that we can't read a long article. They want to read those small little articles, and they're going to take with it everything that people read. And you and I talked about it real quick. If we didn't have all this information that we have at our fingertips every day, it'd be very hard for us to do what we're doing right now. And I think we've both mentioned that we use a bunch of go-to websites, and that just happens not to be one of them. So that's what I got for tonight.
Absolutely. I think we had a great conversation. It was nice talking to you tonight, man. I know we went long, as we tend to do. This seems to be more of a 90-minute podcast every night than a 60-minute one. But, yeah, it was good talking to you. Do it again next week.
See you all next week. Don't forget to visit us at our website. We also have our podcast up. They're on our website. You can catch them on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter, and you will definitely see us out there, and you'll hear from us next week.
Don't forget to mention that we are now on iTunes, so make sure you go out and find us on there.
Yep, we're at One Take Sports.
One Take Sports on iTunes. Go out and find us, get our podcast there, and we'll be sure to make sure that everybody hears from us throughout the week. As far as all the other NBA news, the little short stuff, we're gonna have some good articles for you. So yeah, look forward to next week. Thanks for listening.